the North, with 21 million people, mostly free, decided it was unhappy with the South, 9 million people, half of whom were slaves, having the same amount of say in Congress as the 21 million free Northerners. But he wasn't quite as one-sided as that.
What you just said.
The North had been for a while economically bullying the South. The South wants to keep its way of life because economically it had done very well out of the great economic crashes that had happened before, which had done the North and the other industrialised nations no end of harm. The South had relied on agrarian, so its economy was based on cotton and tobacco. And basically these required large amounts of manual labour, so they required slavery. The North had begun to pick up the ball. It was moving into a more modern era, it was moving into a more industrialised era, and therefore it no longer required slavery. But the big problem was that the delicate balance was going to be upset by several factors. The first of which was the fact that several new states wanted to join the Union. Now, if they joined the merry gang that was divided at the minute, they could in fact tip the balance one way or the other. So they could have, if they'd have joined as free states, tipped the balance of power into the North's favour. If they'd have joined as slavery states, the other way. And in fact, in Kansas and Nebraska, pretty much a mini civil war has broken out 10 years before the American Civil War. Sorry, 5 years before the American Civil War. Now what I've got here is some cannons left from an earlier battle, and we have here a couple of Confederates guarding our cannon. What the Confederates don't know is they're being crept up on. Now in the war between the blue and the grey, the gentlemen, of course, guarding the cannon, they're not dressed in grey, they're dressed in butternut, but we'll come back to that in a second. And the gentlemen creeping up on them are dressed in green. The reason for the blue and the grey is the standard army colour of the American Army is blue, and we'll see that a little bit later. The Confederates, when they first started, had no alternative colour other than the cadet uniform. The cadet uniform was grey, so they used it. There we go, they opened fire on the Confederates. You see the Confederate there running to tell his friends. So he's running back to base to let base know, to let command know, and then come under attack. Now the gentlemen coming up upon them are 1st US sharpshooters. These gentlemen are actually dressed in green with no shiny buttons. All their buttons are blacked out. The reason for this is their commander, Verdun, thought it would be a good idea if they could be able to hide, not be seen easily, and shoot at the enemy before the enemy even knew who was there. Their job was to move ahead and skirmish order as they're doing, take out gunners, take out buglers, generals, runners, that sort of thing, and they're very good at it. So much so that he insisted that they be armed with the latest and greatest weapon, the Sharps rifle, and they are. Because these rifles cost nearly $40, the Union government didn't want to spend all that money, and they made it cheaper. The only way they could do this was to remove a fixture. The two fixtures that could be removed were the bayonet fixture,
the horses don't like
or
the gun.
the trigger, the special trigger which allowed accuracy. Verdun asked them to remove the bayonet fixture. They're not having it all their own way because they've just taken those guns as they were ordered to do, and immediately they come under harassing fire from the Confederate cavalry. Now the Confederate cavalry there has just facilitated the escape of the Confederate gunner, the Confederate guard, which is not what the Union commander wanted. He would have liked his attack to go unknown up to this point. Now, although the engagement today is taking place at quite short ranges, we are going to have to ask you just to suspend disbelief a little bit, because the ranges we have to operate are about a fifth of the ranges they actually operate at, but we can't take that onto the field. So, what we're having to do, if you like, is range everything down to a fifth of the actual range, just so we can fit it on the field that we've got to operate on. Now you see here the cavalry being driven off. During the American Civil War, cavalry Of course, muskets had an accurate range of about 50 yards and could fire 3 times a minute. Rifles were available, and we'll see them later, but they couldn't fire 3 times a minute. During this period, we get the best of both worlds. A man called WWII invented a magic bullet, which is slightly too small, fits down a rifled weapon that expands on being shot, and therefore means that the rifleman can fire 3 rounds a minute, but he's firing a rifled weapon with an accurate range of about 250 yards. Against massed cavalry, this can be expanded to 500, so a cavalry charge will be engaged not at 50 yards, but at 500 yards. Each man firing 3 times. Cavalry charges. The Union there bringing its guns to bear.
Cannons look like they're going to fire.
Now, the fairly modern tactics of the sharpshooters, skirmish order, are respected by the older tactics of the infantry, especially furthest away from the town, the 19th Indiana with the Victoria Black Panthers. You see they operate as an old-fashioned block unit. You see this very much during the Napoleonic battle, which is to follow in an hour. In fact, this is derivative of that because they still haven't got the idea of what's happening. The weapons of this era had very much been advanced so much that the tactics hadn't caught up. In fact, by the end of this, we will have exploding rifles, we will have multi-shot repeating rifles, and our tactics still will not have changed dramatically. You can hear there the beat of the drum blowing past the hour as the Confederates come onto the field. Again in a smile, a good old-fashioned block fire. Meanwhile, the Confederates that were actually defending the so unlike the Union troops who are stood in an open field, they're in defilade, they're in a trench.
He's having a bit of problem firing his gun on the very end.
It's more difficult to shoot you. By the end of this period, we will see trench warfare, repeating weapons, and of course, the First World War. The country this would be normally done straight at the beginning of the battle with the hope of causing maximum damage all in one go to the opposing force. You can see the general here, the captain of the orders. There's a sword. There's very few wounds done by sword during the American Civil War. But swords are very useful because with one motion he can gesture exactly what he wants. Generally used as a magic one after man, which is exactly what they should be used as. You can see the Union Army there on fire, firing away in that good old-fashioned manner, which you'll see in the Napoleonic era. We have already in principle the modern style of fighting. The sharpshooters are already shown that skirmish order.
There's the one that knows me. And your friend from the regimental level. Marching in time with the The problem is that drones can be drowned out and raised by cannon fire. So for longer range communication, we rely on the bugle, which you heard there. Most bugles, when a job of listening rather than firing, it was their job to listen to the commander. You sit there, the captain giving orders to the cavalry. Of course, reluctant. war, generally used as skirmishers or harassing or even messing. Confederate cavalry suffered several debilitating drawbacks. First, it was still reliant on
The smoke staying on the grass.
which is very easy when you're but secondly, they didn't have modern infrastructure drafted. By the end of the war, Northern cavalry had breech loading or repeating carbines. Although the sabre is carried by the cavalry, you will notice that most of them don't use it. It was very rare that it got into combat, and many units simply stopped using it.
That is your friend. Back.
Looks to me like the Union unit caused a lot of damage to the Confederate unit, but the Union unit's not that big anyway. As they load and fire and more accurate weapons, and they go around and see that the same thing happening, and yet the sharpshooters are actually in a low skirmish line. And I noticed that they're the only people on the battlefield that aren't stood upright. Now it may sound a pretty silly thing to do, to stand upright and face your enemy, but in fact, 3 times a minute, while kneeling down, 7 times a minute, kneeling down.
Hey.
Native Indiana will engage.
Ooh.
That's from the side by cavalry, so it's an abundant cost. The last thing you want to happen is to be engaged from 2 sides, which is exactly what happened there. Again, firing by company from the 90th Indiana, major shock and all tactics. And they found they weren't as accurate. But now, by doing that, they found the entire company, they were all empty, and now they're marching only fully loaded Confederates. And now they're
Why don't they get
marching
ammunition off the dead guy?
from the Confederates here. And now what's happened is the company that was defending the flank, all of our guns, is now laying bare. And now their flank is now in there, and of course our cavalry are still out there. Of course our Confederate company here is on the march again. Now, many people might think that the flag we've got here is we've got a Texans with a flag. It's the star pointing directly upwards. Texan flag is they wanted to get the tobacco that much that they insisted that the point of their star point to where the battle is, which is why right there has the point of the star pointing at the battle and not at the traitor. The cannons involved in this battle today are 12-pound Napoleon cannons. Probably the only thing during the war that never got changed. It never got improved. It never
Man down there by cannon.
to be. It was pretty much a weapon. It was a smooth ball gun, quite capable of hitting a barn at a mile. That was exactly what you could do with it. And nobody saw the need to improve the weapon system because no Civil War battle took place over a wall. Now, so you moved into the flank of the guns, managed to destroy one of the gun crews. Had the cannon been pointed at the because the canister that the American fires, it can actually be turned into a 4-inch wide shotgun, which is devastation against the unit. So what's happened here is the Confederates have managed to hold the Union Army at bay. The Confederates have flanked them.
His hat off.
Now, the whole Confederate army on the right flank is receiving open fire from 2 points. Not just that, but they're now going to get harassed from behind by the cavalry. And although the cavalry don't want to end up in a full engagement, this means that the Union armies have to split on subject power in response.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also meant that the Union army has had to move his cannon, and therefore is not enjoying the support of that cannon for the last 2 minutes of the battle. Most of the country limps towards the enclave, which is under the where the cannon is stored. For the Union army, keeping the cannon is kind of handy because it means they can use them. Because every side's using the same ammunition. The most common guns are the 577 Springfields, sorry, the 577 Enfields and the 58 caliber.
Oh, that
Relatively
shook
the
me.
same ammunition. Therefore, both sides in the dispute are actually using exactly the same ammunition, exactly the same guns, so everything's interchangeable. For the North, they can produce bullets like nobody's business. In fact, for every bullet produced by the South, the North can produce over 250.
That's a lot. For every one, there's 250.
By the North, the South has one difficulty producing one.
Keep like a banzai.
The railway network to move it. So logistically, the North has a massive advantage and should have won this war outright right from the start. But bad generalship on the part of the North, generally because the generals and good commanding officers went to the South at the beginning of the war. Don't forget, these are all Americans. You see there the general giving all of his, so the captain giving all of his command by sword. Very simple. He's asking his cavalry to come to him. He thinks he's got this one, but he's saying to the cavalry, come and tell me what's happening on that flank. And the Union army now pinned behind its own gun. So, as I mentioned, the best source of supply for the Confederates, because they had no industry, they didn't have a great source of supply, is those dead Union. So for the Union to capture the battlefield, that's kind of handy. For the Confederate to capture the battlefield, that's kind of a necessity, because it's one of the best places they could get ammunition and supplies. The Confederates had very little resource base, they were really struggling. By the end of the American Civil War, the Confederate would be lucky if he'd been paid in a year, he'd be very lucky if he had a pair of shoes, and he'd be very lucky if he got rations on a regular basis, never mind ammunition.
No one that I know, Sam. He's flanked around there.
The only one I know is they're dead.
He's dead.
Tinned food.
Like I said, you could see it better than me.
And the latest guns will begin to become available to the
That was him that just
So you can see that
stood
the
up and
Union
fired.
really didn't have to do anything other than fight. By the end of the war, of course, the Union won, because for every man that the South could field, the Union could in fact field 4.
Oh, another man down.
Right there, can you see
The
it?
big point of the war is kind of interesting, because Britain and France and Russia would have very much liked to see this war end in a Confederate victory. They would have liked that because it would have divided the new big boy in the yard, the new world superpower America, into 2 less consequential superpowers. But with the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, that effectively ended the intervention of Britain, France and Russia. Now as the fighting continues, you can see that the remaining Confederates have in fact held the guns. The remaining Confederates now have control of the cannons in the battlefield. As the fighting begins to... One of the hideous things about this war is the nature of the way regiments were raised. Regiments were raised by town. So the town filled a regiment of 100 men. It was a small town. That was all the eligible units in that town. And if that regiment was lost or suffered 60% casualties, which happened, in fact some regiments suffered 100% casualties, then pretty much that town had lost all of its young men. It's not like the way modern regiments are raised. You can
here the fighting has come to an abrupt stop there. Now one of the things that the Confederates didn't have, as I mentioned there, was adequate supplies of ammunition. You can see them trying to raid the body of the Union for ammunition. They're beginning to fall back now by the looks of it. The Union are pushing their advantage. General Grant had done the maths. He stopped fighting the Napoleonic style battle that we're going to see in the Napoleonics. And he started fighting an everyday battle. He would engage Lee every day, every hour, every moment, apart from darkness, when very few American Civil War battles took place, and he would engage them all the time. For 30 days non-stop, he engaged the Army of the Potomac. Simple. Lee can win every battle, but sooner or later he'll run out of men.
So your friend's dead, mine technically he's still alive.
He could outspy, he could outman,
He's crouched down
and he could
closer to the trunk.
It didn't even matter if he lost every battle, Lee ran out of men, which is exactly what happened to the Army of the Potomac.
Surprised the horses aren't all skittish from the gunfire.
Fight off cavalry and fight off the remaining Confederates now. At this point, the sabre can be used. The sabre would not normally be used against a well-guarded regiment. In fact,
that horse jumped a bit.
During the Battle of Waterloo, which we'll come to in the next battle, which will be in about half an hour's time. As the battle draws to a close, many of you that are watching will see that casualties on this field are pretty much near to 60%. The average amount of casualties shown in American Civil War battle is 40%. In today's standard, that would be counted as a massacre, regardless of who won. By today's standard.
I think Sam's still alive.
And yet this was happening every
He's one of the three running.
for 4 years. Looks to me like the Union Army has actually been routed from the field. Surrendering was an option, because of course they were all Americans. In the early days, men would simply be swapped back. They used to swap the prisoners over, swap them back. However, following an incident where black troops were gunned down by Confederates at a place called Fort Pillow, Grant stopped the exchange, mainly because he'd done the maths, and he realised the South had run out of men. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause for the American Civil War Society?
I believe it looked like it was going to be a Union victory. Shows just how quick a battle can change.
Just take a moment to remember that this war killed 600,000 Americans, 2% of the population. More than had been killed in every war previously, and more than has been killed in the First and Second World Wars combined. This war was the bloodiest war in American history. So I'm just going to leave you for a moment just to consider 600,000.